A millionaire drove his Lamborghini to a slum. Then a dirty kid ran up yelling, "You're my dad." The California sun glinted off the polished hood of Richard Grayson's Lamborghini Aventador, a machine that screamed wealth, power, and a carefully cultivated image of success. Richard, at 45, was the epitome of the self-made millionaire. He had built a software empire from the ground up, his ambition and relentless drive propelling him to the heights of the tech world. His life was a whirlwind of board meetings, private jets, lavish parties, and a string of fleeting, superficial relationships. He lived in a sprawling mansion overlooking the Pacific Ocean, a modern glass and steel structure that was more a showpiece than a home. He had all the material possessions he could ever desire, but a nagging emptiness gnawed at him, a void that no amount of money or success could fill. He was driving today to a part of Los Angeles he usually avoided, the sprawling, impoverished slums that lay in the shadow of the city's glittering skyscrapers. It was a world away from his privileged existence, a place of poverty, desperation, and forgotten dreams. He wasn't going there out of any personal connection. His visit was prompted by a recent board meeting of the Grayson Foundation, his company's charitable arm. The foundation, mostly a PR exercise, had decided to launch a new initiative, a project to revitalize a particularly blighted neighborhood, providing affordable housing, job training, and educational opportunities. Richard, usually detached from the foundation's activities, had surprised everyone, including himself, by volunteering to personally scout the location. He had offered a vague explanation about wanting to get a feel for the community, but his true motivations were more complex, more personal. He had been feeling increasingly restless, dissatisfied with his life, despite his outward success. He was haunted by a sense of emptiness, a feeling that he was missing something essential. He had started to question his choices, his priorities, his relentless pursuit of wealth and status. He had also been thinking a lot about his past, about the life he had left behind, the people he had hurt, the dreams he had abandoned. He had been thinking about Sarah, his first love, the woman he had left 10 years ago to pursue his ambitions. He hadn't seen or spoken to her since, but he knew she had stayed in Los Angeles, that she had struggled, that she had never achieved the success he had found. He had occasionally considered reaching out to her, but he had always hesitated, unsure of what he would say, unsure of how she would react. Now, driving towards the slums, he felt a strange mix of apprehension and anticipation. He wasn't sure what he was looking for, what he expected to find. But he felt a pull, a need to confront his past, to face the consequences of his choices, to see, perhaps, if there was any way to make amends. The drive was a journey through contrasting worlds. The gleaming skyscrapers and manicured lawns of Beverly Hills gradually gave way to dilapidated buildings, graffiti-covered walls, and streets filled with the debris of poverty and neglect. The air, once crisp and clean, became thick with the smell of exhaust fumes, decay, and despair. Richard felt a growing sense of unease, a discomfort that went beyond the unfamiliar surroundings. He was an outsider here, a stranger in a strange land, his luxury car a jarring symbol of the vast gulf that separated his world from the world of those who lived in these forgotten corners of the city. The drive was not just a physical journey, but a metaphorical one, a descent into a reality he had long ignored, a confrontation with the consequences of his choices, and a potential catalyst for change in a life that had become defined by wealth and devoid of genuine connection. The designated area for the charity project was a bleak expanse of cracked asphalt, littered with debris and surrounded by dilapidated buildings. A few children played listlessly among the rubble, their clothes worn and dirty, their eyes reflecting a weariness that belied their young age. Richard parked his Lamborghini, the ostentatious vehicle a jarring contrast to the poverty that surrounded it. He felt a pang of guilt, a sense of unease at the blatant display of his wealth in this environment of deprivation. He got out of the car, his expensive suit and Italian leather shoes feeling out of place, attracting stares from the residents who were watching him with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. He felt exposed, vulnerable, a stranger in a strange land. He was about to walk towards a group of community organizers who were waiting for him near a makeshift tent when he heard a shout, a child's voice, filled with excitement and a strange familiarity. "Dad, you're my dad, right?" Richard turned, his heart skipping a beat. A young boy, no older than 8, was running towards him, his bare feet pounding on the cracked pavement, his face grimy, his clothes tattered, but his eyes shining with an unmistakable hope. The boy reached him, throwing his arms around Richard's leg, clinging to him with a desperate grip. Richard stood there, frozen, stunned, his mind reeling. "Dad," the boy repeated, his voice muffled against Richard's expensive trousers. "It's you. It's really you." Richard looked down at the boy, his heart aching with a mixture of confusion, disbelief, and a strange, unfamiliar pang of emotion. He gently pried the boy's arms from his leg, kneeling down to get a closer look. The boy's face was dirty, his hair matted, but his features were undeniably familiar. He had the same dark, intense eyes, the same slightly crooked nose, the same stubborn chin. He looked like Richard himself as a child. Richard felt a jolt of recognition, a shock that ran through him like an electric current. He stared at the boy, his mind racing, trying to make sense of what was happening. "What's your name?" Richard asked, his voice trembling. "Alex," the boy replied, his eyes searching Richard's face, his expression a mixture of hope and apprehension. "My mom, she said you were my dad." Alex. The name echoed in Richard's mind, a whisper from the past, a reminder of a life he had left behind. He remembered Sarah, his first love, the woman he had abandoned 10 years ago. He remembered her telling him she was pregnant, his panic, his selfish decision to prioritize his career over his responsibilities. He had convinced himself that he was doing the right thing, that he was too young to be a father, that he needed to focus on his ambitions. He had sent Sarah money, a paltry sum compared to his current wealth, and then he had cut off all contact, disappearing from her life without a trace. Now, standing here in this desolate slum, facing this young boy, his son, the consequences of his actions hit him with full force. The guilt, the shame, the regret washed over him, a tidal wave of emotion that threatened to drown him. He was about to push the boy away, to deny the truth, to retreat back into his comfortable, detached existence. But then, he looked into Alex's eyes, those eyes that were so much like his own, and he saw a flicker of hope, a desperate longing for connection, a plea for acceptance. And in that moment, something inside him shifted. The carefully constructed walls he had built around his heart, the walls of ambition, of greed, of self-preservation, began to crumble. He reached out, gently touching Alex's cheek, his fingers tracing the familiar curve of his jaw. "Alex," he said, his voice choked with emotion. I think you might be right." Tears welled up in his eyes, tears he hadn't shed in years, tears of regret, of remorse, but also, perhaps, of a newfound hope. The encounter, so unexpected, so shocking, had shattered his carefully constructed world, forcing him to confront his past, to face the consequences of his choices, and to embark on a journey of redemption, a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about himself, about love, and about the true meaning of family. The face from the past, the mirror image of his younger self, had become a catalyst for change, a force that would propel him toward a future he could never have imagined. The drive back to his mansion felt different this time. The Lamborghini, once a symbol of his success and freedom, now felt like a gilded cage, a reminder of the empty, materialistic life he had built for himself. Alex sat beside him, quiet and reserved, his small hand gripping the edge of the leather seat, his eyes wide with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Richard glanced at him, his heart aching with a mixture of guilt and a burgeoning sense of protectiveness. He saw a reflection of himself in the boy's features, but he also saw something else, a vulnerability, a resilience, a quiet strength that he himself had never possessed. His thoughts drifted back to Sarah, to the woman he had loved and abandoned, to the life he had turned his back on. He remembered their first meeting at a college party, her infectious laughter, her bright, intelligent eyes, her passionate spirit. She had been an art student, full of dreams and ideals, a stark contrast to his own pragmatic, career-focused ambition. They had fallen in love quickly, intensely, their connection fueled by a shared passion for life and a mutual desire to make a difference in the world. They had spent countless hours talking, dreaming, planning their future together. He had even talked about marriage, about starting a family, about building a life together. But then, his career had taken off. He had received a job offer in Silicon Valley, a chance to join a promising startup, a pathway to the wealth and success he had always craved. He had been torn between his love for Sarah and his ambition, his desire for a stable future and his fear of commitment. He had tried to convince Sarah to come with him, to leave everything behind and start a new life in California. But she had refused. She had her own dreams, her own aspirations, her own roots in Los Angeles. She wanted to be an artist, to create beauty, to make a difference in her own way. He had accused her of being unsupportive, of holding him back, of not understanding his ambition. She had accused him of being selfish, of prioritizing his career over their relationship, of abandoning his values. The argument had been bitter, hurtful, the final blow to a relationship that had already been strained by his growing obsession with work and his increasing emotional distance. He had left, walking away without looking back, convincing himself that he was doing the right thing, that he was choosing his future, his success. He had buried himself in his work, achieving phenomenal success, accumulating wealth and power, but always with a nagging sense of emptiness, a void that he couldn't fill. He had dated other women, but none of them had ever measured up to Sarah. None of them had ever touched his heart in the same way. He had occasionally thought about contacting her, about apologizing, about trying to reconnect. But he had always hesitated, afraid of her rejection, afraid of facing the consequences of his actions. He had told himself that she was better off without him, that he had made his choice, that he had to live with the consequences. Now, looking at Alex, seeing Sarah's eyes and his son's face, he realized the magnitude of his mistake, the depth of his regret. He had abandoned not just Sarah, but his own child, a child he had never known, a child who had grown up in poverty and hardship because of his selfish choices. The echoes of yesterday, the memories of his past, were flooding back, forcing him to confront the man he had been, the man he had become, and the man he now wanted to be. The encounter with Alex had not only revealed a hidden son, but it had also unearthed a buried conscience, a longing for redemption, a desire to make amends for the mistakes of his past. The drive back to his mansion was a journey through time, a reckoning with his past, and a prelude to a future that was now irrevocably altered by the presence of this young boy, his son, a living embodiment of the love and the life he had left behind. Richard, still reeling from the shock of discovering he had a son, knew he needed to confirm Alex's paternity beyond a reasonable doubt. While the resemblance was striking, and Alex's claim about his mother being Richard's first love was compelling, he needed certainty. He also knew he needed to find Sarah. He decided to confide in his longtime personal assistant, Margaret Olson, a different Margaret from previous stories, a woman in her 50s who had been with him for over 15 years. Margaret was more than just an assistant. She was a confidant, a trusted advisor, and often the voice of reason in his otherwise chaotic life. "Margaret," he said, his voice strained, "I need your help. I think I have a son." Margaret, unflappable as always, simply raised an eyebrow. "Oh," she said, "and how did this come about?" Richard, he recounted the events of the day, his visit to the slums, his encounter with Alex, the boy's claim about his mother. Margaret listened patiently, her expression a mixture of surprise and concern. "Do you know anything about the boy's mother?" she asked. "Her name is Sarah," Richard said. "Sarah Miller. At least, that was her name when I knew her. We were in college together. I haven't seen her in 10 years. Margaret's eyes widened slightly. She remembered Sarah. She had met her a few times, years ago, when Richard had briefly seemed to consider a life beyond his relentless pursuit of success. "I remember her," Margaret said. "She was a lovely girl. Very talented, very grounded." "I need to find her, Margaret," Richard said. "And I need to find out if Alex is truly my son. Can you help me with that?" Margaret nodded. "Of course, Richard. I'll do whatever I can." Margaret, using her considerable resources and contacts, quickly located Sarah Miller. She was living in a small apartment in a low-income neighborhood, not far from where Richard had found Alex. She was working 2 jobs, struggling to make ends meet, her dreams of becoming an artist long since abandoned. Margaret also arranged for a discreet DNA test, using a reputable lab that could guarantee confidentiality and accuracy. She managed to get a sample of Richard's DNA without arousing his suspicion. While they waited for the DNA results, Richard found a pretext, a school project, to get it from Alex without raising suspicion. Richard, meanwhile, was struggling to adjust to the presence of Alex in his life. He had brought the boy back to his mansion, a place that was utterly foreign to Alex, a world of unimaginable luxury and privilege. Alex was overwhelmed, awestruck by the size of the house, the swimming pool, the endless array of toys and gadgets. But he was also shy, withdrawn, and clearly uncomfortable in his new surroundings. He missed his mother, his friends, his familiar, if impoverished life. Richard tried to connect with him, to engage him in conversation, to play with him, but he felt awkward, clumsy, unsure of how to be a father. He had spent so many years focused on his career, on accumulating wealth, that he had no experience with children, no understanding of their needs, their fears, their dreams. He realized, with a pang of regret, that he had missed out on so much, on the simple joys of fatherhood, on the profound connection that comes from nurturing and guiding a young life. The DNA results arrived, confirming what Richard had already suspected. Alex was his son. The probability of paternity was 99.99%. There was no doubt. Richard felt a surge of emotion, a mixture of relief, guilt, joy, and a profound sense of responsibility. He had a son, a child he had never known, a child who needed him, a child who deserved a better life. He knew he had to tell Sarah, to face her, to confront the past, to try to make amends. He asked Margaret to arrange a meeting, a private meeting, where he could speak with Sarah alone. The meeting took place at a neutral location, a small, quiet cafe. Richard arrived first, his heart pounding, his hands trembling. He hadn't seen Sarah in 10 years, and he was filled with a mixture of apprehension and anticipation. When Sarah arrived, Richard was struck by how much she had changed. She was thinner, her face etched with lines of worry and exhaustion, her eyes lacking the spark, the vibrancy he remembered. But she still possessed a quiet dignity, a strength that he had always admired. They sat in silence for a moment. The years of separation, the unspoken words, the unresolved emotions, hanging heavy in the air. Finally, Richard spoke, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Sarah," he said, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. I abandoned you. I abandoned our child. I was selfish, ambitious, and I was wrong." Sarah looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Why are you here, Richard?" she asked, her voice cold and distant. "I met Alex," he said. He found me, and I had a DNA test done. He's my son, Sarah. He's our son." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes, tears of anger, of resentment, of a pain that had never fully healed. "You think a DNA test makes you a father?" she said, her voice trembling. "You think a piece of paper gives you the right to walk back into our lives after all these years?" "No," Richard said, his voice pleading. "I know it doesn't, but I want to be a part of his life. Sarah, I want to make amends. I want to be his father." Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching, questioning, trying to discern his sincerity, his motives. She had been hurt, betrayed, abandoned. She had struggled for years to raise her son alone, to provide for him, to protect him. She had built a wall around her heart, a wall of protection, of self-preservation. "Why now, Richard?" she asked. "Why after all these years?" "Because I was a fool," he said, his voice filled with regret. "Because I prioritized my career over my family, over love. Because I didn't realize what was truly important until it was almost too late. I made a lot of mistakes, Sarah, but I want to do better. I want to be better. For Alex and for you." The conversation was long, difficult, and emotionally charged. Sarah expressed her anger, her resentment, her pain. Richard listened, apologized, and pleaded for a chance to make amends. He told her about his life, his success, his emptiness. He told her about his desire to change, to become a better man, a better father. He told her about his commitment to Alex, his willingness to do whatever it took to earn his trust, to build a relationship with him. Slowly, gradually, Sarah's defenses began to soften. She saw the sincerity in Richard's eyes, the genuine remorse in his voice. She realized that he was not the same man he had been 10 years ago, that he had changed, that he was truly trying to make amends. She agreed to allow Richard to see Alex, to spend time with him, to get to know him. But she also made it clear that it wouldn't be easy, that he would have to earn their trust, that he would have to prove himself worthy of being a father. The truth had been revealed, the paternity confirmed, and the long, difficult process of reconciliation had begun. The past could not be undone, but the future was still unwritten. And for Richard, Sarah, and Alex, that future, though uncertain, held the possibility of healing, of forgiveness, and of a family reunited, a family forged not by blood alone, but by a shared commitment to love, to responsibility, and to second chances. The initial meetings between Richard and Alex were awkward, hesitant, filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Alex, having grown up with only his mother, was understandably wary of this stranger who claimed to be his father. He was shy, reserved, and protective of his mother, his eyes constantly darting between Richard and Sarah, assessing the situation, searching for any sign of danger. Richard, accustomed to commanding boardrooms and negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, found himself completely out of his depth. He had no experience with children, no understanding of their emotional needs, their unspoken fears. He felt clumsy, inadequate, unsure of how to bridge the vast gulf that separated him from his son. He started slowly, cautiously, trying to find common ground, to establish a connection. He brought Alex gifts, toys, video games, but these material offerings felt hollow, insufficient. He realized that what Alex needed was not things, but time, attention, and genuine affection. He started spending weekends with Alex, taking him to the park, to the zoo, to baseball games. He tried to engage him in conversation, asking him about his interests, his friends, his school. But Alex remained guarded, his responses brief and monosyllabic. Richard struggled with the silence, with the lack of connection, with the feeling that he was failing as a father. He confided in Margaret, his assistant, seeking her advice, her guidance. "Be patient, Richard," Margaret advised. "It takes time to build trust, especially with a child who has been through so much. Just be there for him. Show him you care. Show him you're not going to disappear again." Richard took her advice to heart. He persisted, showing up consistently, offering his support, his presence, his unwavering commitment to being a part of Alex's life. He started attending Alex's school events, his soccer games, his parent-teacher conferences. He helped him with his homework, read him bedtime stories, and tucked him in at night. He slowly, gradually, began to integrate himself into Alex's world. One evening, as Richard was tucking Alex into bed, Alex asked him a question that caught him off guard. "Why did you leave?" he asked, his voice small and hesitant. "Why didn't you want to be my dad?" Richard's heart ached. He had been dreading this question, but he knew he had to answer it honestly, truthfully. "I was young, Alex," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "And I was selfish. I was focused on my career, on making money, on achieving success. I thought those things were more important than family. I was wrong. I made a terrible mistake, and I've regretted it every day since." He looked at Alex, his eyes filled with tears. "I can't change the past, Alex," he said. "But I can promise you this. I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. I want to be your dad, if you'll let me." Alex looked at him, his eyes searching, questioning. He didn't say anything, but he reached out and took Richard's hand, his small fingers wrapping around his. It was a small gesture, a simple act of connection, but it was a turning point. It was the beginning of a bond, the foundation of a relationship, the start of a healing process. Over time, Alex began to open up, to trust Richard, to accept him as his father. He started to share his thoughts, his feelings, his dreams. He started to laugh, to play, to be a child again. Richard, in turn, discovered the joys of fatherhood, the profound connection that comes from nurturing and guiding a young life. He learned to be patient, to be understanding, to be present. He realized that true success was not measured in wealth or power, but in love, in family, in the bonds that tie us together. The divide between them, the years of separation, the pain of abandonment began to heal, replaced by a growing sense of connection, of belonging, of love. It was a slow, gradual process, but it was real, it was genuine, and it was transforming both of their lives. The bridge was being built, slowly but surely, connecting father and son, creating a family where there had once been only absence and regret. And as they walked that bridge together, they were discovering a new world, a world of shared experiences, of mutual respect, and of a love that had been delayed but not denied. While Richard's relationship with Alex blossomed, another, more complex relationship required attention, the one with Sarah. He knew he couldn't simply focus on his son and ignore the woman he had hurt so deeply. He had to face Sarah, to confront the past, and to try to make amends, not just for Alex's sake, but for his own. The initial meetings with Sarah had been tense, filled with unspoken anger and resentment. She had agreed to allow Richard to see Alex, but she had kept her distance, her emotions guarded, her trust broken. But as she witnessed Richard's genuine commitment to Alex, his consistent presence, his efforts to be a good father, her attitude began to soften. She saw the changes in him, the remorse in his eyes, the sincerity in his apologies. One evening, after Richard had spent the day with Alex, he asked Sarah if they could talk alone. She hesitated, but then agreed. They met at a small park near Sarah's apartment, a neutral ground where they could speak openly and honestly. The air was cool, the leaves on the trees beginning to turn, a reminder of the passage of time, of the changing seasons of life. "Sarah," Richard began, his voice hesitant, "I know I can never fully make up for what I did. I abandoned you, I abandoned our child. I was selfish, and I was wrong. But I want you to know, I'm truly sorry." Sarah looked at him, her expression a mixture of sadness and anger. "Sorry doesn't change anything, Richard," she said. "It doesn't erase the years of struggle, the pain, the loneliness." "I know," Richard said, "but I hope that we can move forward for Alex's sake. He needs both of us, Sarah, and I need you too. I need your forgiveness, your understanding." Sarah was silent for a moment, her gaze fixed on the ground. She had carried this anger, this resentment for so long. It had become a part of her, a shield against further pain. But she also knew that holding on to it was hurting her, preventing her from moving on, from finding peace. "I don't know if I can forgive you, Richard," she said, her voice trembling. "What you did, it was unforgivable. You broke my heart. You abandoned your child." "I know," Richard said, his voice choked with emotion. "And I deserve your anger. I deserve your resentment. But please, Sarah, don't punish Alex for my mistakes. He needs his father. And I want to be that father, the father I should have been from the beginning." Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching, questioning. She saw the sincerity in his gaze, the genuine remorse in his voice. She saw the changes in him, the transformation that had been wrought by his rediscovery of his son. "It's not going to be easy, Richard," she said. "It's going to take time. But I'm willing to try. For Alex's sake. And maybe someday for my own." It was a tentative truce, a fragile agreement to move forward, to co-parent Alex, to put his needs first. It was not a reconciliation, not a rekindling of their past romance. But it was a beginning, a step towards healing, a chance to build a new kind of relationship based on mutual respect, shared responsibility, and a commitment to their son. Richard knew he had a long way to go to earn Sarah's trust, to repair the damage he had caused. But he was determined to do whatever it took to prove himself worthy of her forgiveness, to be a positive presence in both her life and Alex's. He started by taking on more financial responsibility, providing for Alex's needs, ensuring that Sarah had the resources she needed to create a stable and comfortable home. He also made an effort to be more involved in Alex's life, attending school events, helping with homework, and simply spending quality time with him. He also started to open up to Sarah, sharing his own struggles, his regrets, his hopes for the future. He told her about his empty, materialistic life, about the void that Alex had filled, about the transformation he was undergoing. Slowly, gradually, the walls between them began to crumble, replaced by a tentative understanding, a shared commitment to their son, and a grudging respect for each other's strength and resilience. They were facing the past, confronting the pain, and navigating the complexities of their new reality together. It was a difficult, challenging process, but it was also a necessary one, a path towards healing, towards forgiveness, and towards building a future where their son could thrive, surrounded by the love and support of both his parents. The confrontation with Sarah was not a single event, but an ongoing process, a journey of healing and reconciliation that would take time, patience, and a willingness to confront the ghosts of the past and build a new foundation for the future. Years passed, and the wounds of the past, though still present, began to heal. Richard Grayson, once the driven, self-absorbed millionaire, had become a devoted father, a supportive co-parent, and a man transformed by the rediscovery of his son and the confrontation with his past mistakes. He had sold his software company, realizing that his relentless pursuit of wealth had cost him more than he had gained. He used a significant portion of his fortune to establish a foundation dedicated to supporting single mothers and underprivileged children, a tangible expression of his remorse and his commitment to making amends. He remained actively involved in Alex's life, attending his school events, cheering him on at his soccer games, and celebrating his achievements. He had learned to be present, to be engaged, to be the father Alex deserved. Alex, now a teenager, had grown into a confident, compassionate, and well-adjusted young man. He excelled in school, he was a talented artist, and he had a close circle of friends. He understood his father's past mistakes, and he had forgiven him, recognizing the genuine change in him and appreciating his unwavering commitment to their relationship. He had also grown close to his half-siblings from recent relationship of Richard. Richard and Sarah, though never rekindling their romantic relationship, had developed a strong and respectful co-parenting partnership. They communicated openly, collaborated on decisions regarding Alex's upbringing, and supported each other's efforts to create a stable and loving environment for their son. They even started to become a friend. Richard had also made a significant effort to reconnect with his community. He became involved in local charities, volunteered his time at a homeless shelter, and used his influence to advocate for social justice and economic equality. He had learned that true wealth was not measured in dollars and cents, but in the impact you have on the lives of others, in the contributions you make to your community, and the legacy you leave behind. One evening, as Richard was driving Alex home from soccer practice, Alex turned to him and asked, "Dad, do you ever regret, leaving Mom and me?" Richard hesitated, his hands tightening on the steering wheel. It was a question he had asked himself countless times, a question that still haunted him. "Yes, Alex," he said, his voice honest and filled with emotion. "I regret it every single day. It was the biggest mistake of my life. But I also believe that everything happens for a reason. If I hadn't made that mistake, I wouldn't have you. And you're the best thing that's ever happened to me." Alex smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that warmed Richard's heart. "I'm glad you're my dad," he said, "even if you did mess up." Richard chuckled, a tear rolling down his cheek. "Thanks, son," he said. "That means the world to me." As they drove on, the city lights twinkling in the distance. Richard felt a sense of peace, a sense of contentment that he had never experienced before. He had made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but he had also learned from them. He had found redemption, not through wealth or power, but through love, through family, through the unwavering commitment to making amends and building a better future. His new legacy was not one of corporate success or material wealth, but one of love, of forgiveness, of second chances. It was a legacy built on the foundation of a father-son relationship that had been forged in the crucible of past mistakes and present-day efforts. It was a legacy that would endure, a testament to the transformative power of human connection and the enduring hope for redemption, even in the face of the most profound regrets. The millionaire had found something far more valuable than money. He had found his heart, his soul, and his family. And in doing so, he had finally found true happiness and lasting fulfillment.